Good afternoon, everyone. My name, of course, is Dr. Julie Tooman. It's lovely to see you all here. So, we had a bit of a discussion about a week ago related to a post about keto diet and thyroid. And as I promised, I'd come in here and do a video regarding why you should not ever, under any circumstance, use keto to try to heal a thyroid condition. Now, I want to preempt this with also saying that I've never encountered a woman without a silent thyroid condition. And I know that's a big statement because many of you may be thinking, no one's ever said I have a thyroid condition. And the reality is I have yet to still find a woman who doesn't have one. So I just want to give you that as a heads up because the means we use to evaluate thyroid in medicine, it's a horrible scale. You know, we're using TSH and T3 and T4, and they tell us some things, but they don't really tell us how the cell is responding in terms of the thyroid. And this is a huge problem because the cell response is ultimately what matters. If your cells are not able to respond to thyroid, you have a thyroid problem, even if your gland is producing tons of hormone. And this is a big deal because it's getting missed and you can't find it on lab tests. And so unfortunately, most women are going untreated. This is true for men too, but my primary focus here is women because what I find is that most women are presenting with classic symptoms. You know, I'm tired. I have, headaches. Hi, Al. I have horrible cycles. My body hurts. My joints hurt. I have digestive issues. My brain is foggy. I have heart disease. I have high blood pressure. I have high cholesterol. These are all related conditions. I have diabetes, like another related condition. And what's happening is that the doctors are taking a really uneducated approach to it by using A, lab values and going, hey, you're normal, or B, subscribing people to paths that are actually aggravating the problem. And so that's why we're here today, because keto is one of those that has become extremely common, and everyone is drawn to keto because they want the quick fix. And I get it, right? You want to look different tomorrow. But the fact is that most of us have a 30-year history of having worn down our body because no one ever taught us how to partner with our body. And so now you're dealing with massive deficit. And the reason why diets like keto produce massive weight loss in a short span of time is that they're elevating your stress hormones. And we're going to get into that. But this is the mechanism of their action. And so if you don't care, cool, more power to you. Take off a bunch of weight, deal with the problems of your stress hormones later, or just deal with the consequences down the road. Fine. That's fine. That's not how I operate though, because my directive is that every step we take should be encouraging better partnership inside of our body, better resiliency at our cells, whole body communication, whole body restoration, and every step should move you forward. You should not have to clean up the mess that gets created from the step that you just did. And yet in medicine, that's now an acceptable thing. And that's true of natural medicine and of conventional medicine. It is okay to create a problem that you have to fix later. And so that's not what I'm here for. So let's talk about this. So let's first understand what the thyroid actually does in the body, like how it works. So you've got a gland, we all know. It produces hormone. It produces inactive hormone. So that hormone then has to be converted to the active form of the hormone. The way that that happens is it takes place mostly in the liver. Now, what that requires is glycogen. Glycogen is stored glucose. So it requires that you have enough stored glucose in the liver to do the conversion of T4 to T3 in order to even get active hormone into circulation. Now here's the deal. Glycogen, like I said, it's stored glucose. Most healthy people can deplete their stored glycogen within 12 hours. Unhealthy people who've been affected by stress, they've got high tissue estrogen, they've got high toxicity, they've got an impaired liver detoxification, they've got inflammation, they've got autoimmune disease, they're exhausted, then your liver's not going to be as efficient. So now you might be looking in that case that you've got about a 6-hour window, which means if you don't replace sufficient glucose in order to store glycogen within that time period, you're going to end up at a deficit of glycogen in the liver, which means when that hormone reaches the liver and needs to be converted, you're not going to have the substrates to do it, which means that as the end result of that, you're not going to be converting. which means your cells are going to be deficient in T3. Now, I know that some people, that's why people, and this is one of the reasons why people like T4, T3 combinations when they're treating thyroid conditions. Now, the challenge there is that T3 has a very short half-life. So a lot of times when you give someone a dose, let's just say of Armour thyroid, and you're getting T3, but you're getting it all as one big bolus, and T3 does better being microdosed across the day because it has about a 2-hour half-life, versus T4 has a 2-week time span of influence. So then that can be a longer effect, which is why we actually need T4 to be sufficient and then be able to have the liver be able to convert it. So, but back to the glycogen conversation. So if you're not consuming carbohydrates because you believe that they're the cause of illness, then what happens is you're not going to have stored liver glycogen because your body's got nothing to put into glycogen storage. For most people, the bare minimum is at least 100 grams of carbohydrate. Now, that's the bare minimum. And quite honestly, I rarely even tell someone that low of a number. It is more commonly that we're talking 150 and above. And this is all got to be based on your physiology and where you're at. So these are just generalized because I don't do anything that is like a one size fits all. But that is generally the rule. In order to meet the base needs of having glycogen available, even just to do this one job. We're not even talking about the role that this, consuming enough glucose plays in actually running the energy systems of your body. This is just at this point talking about T3 conversion. So if we don't have that, then what's going to happen is that your body has to keep turning down the amplitude of thyroid. Because in order to do the conversion, if you don't have the glucose to make the glycogen, you're not going to convert the hormone, which means your body just has T4. It's just hanging out. Well, T4 doesn't do anything. And on top of it, the role of thyroid at the cell is to raise cell energy. It initiates the best possible energy generating pathway in the body. So if the body knows, well, now we don't have enough thyroid because we're not converting and we have no fuel, which is the cell's favorite fuel is glucose and fructose. That's the preferred, most efficient pathway for making energy. Now the body knows, well, we better turn down the amplitude. It's a lot like if you run your house on propane and the tank's almost empty, you don't run the heat on high because you're going to run out. You turn down the thermostat. That's what your body does. It turns down the thermostat because there isn't going to be enough fuel available. And so as this goes on over and over and over, the body recognizes, oh shoot, we don't have access to fuel. Now that sometimes because in the case of keto, it's because we're not eating it. So because we're not consuming the foods that allow us to fuel the cells, the body in its wisdom actually goes to alternate pathways. Now, this is exactly what keto people propagate as the belief that this is the ideal diet because, oh, look, suddenly we're never going to raise blood glucose. But that's a lie because what happens when you go into a ketogenic state is that your body turns around and then converts proteins and fats to glucose. So it's a lie that you're not going to have blood glucose. But the challenge here is this. That step alone requires energy. So you've just demanded that your body in a low energy state exert energy in order to turn protein and fats into glucose because it knows that glucose is the primary preferred energy source pathway of the cell. The problem here is that also the pathway of using that model, protein and fat, to glucose to energy is 300 times less effective than if you had put a molecule of glucose directly into the pathway. Which means not only did you just spend energy to try to make energy, but now the pathway you're using is 300 times less effective. This is a huge margin. If someone told you that if you used a certain type of fuel in your car would be 300 times less effective, do you think you'd go fill up on that fuel again? This is what happens under the influence of keto. You don't put carbohydrates in, your body has to go down this pathway. There's no ands, if, or buts. Now, a lot of people like to say, oh, but you'll never get diabetes if you eat keto. Simply not true. There are people all the time getting diagnosed with diabetes who've been eating keto. The reason is that the mechanism of action is such that your body knows it has to keep trying to convert these fats and proteins to glucose. But the problem is that a lot of what's stored in our bodies is polyunsaturated. Now, I was born in the 70s, so through the 80s, everyone starts promoting, we got to do, these heart healthy diets. So canola is all the rage, vegetable oils. What happened is that these are now up to 80% of the fat we consume as a culture is polyunsaturated. Canola, safflower, sunflower, soy, these are all the fats that we're consuming. And so as a result, our tissues are filled with them. Now here's what happens. You go to burn off that fat that you're so excited to burn off, but it's filled with polyunsaturated fats. When you oxidize those fats, they cause damage to the beta cells of your pancreas. So they actually limit insulin production. So now suddenly, not only are you actually still trying to turn those into glucose, but now you have less insulin to help the glucose get into the cell, because you need glucose to get insulin into the cell. Side note, you don't need insulin to get fructose into the cell. Or I think I said that backwards, right? You need insulin to get glucose into the cell. So regardless, what happens is you can actually have hyperglycemia on a keto diet. I have seen it personally. So I've had people in my practice over the years, diabetics, who thought this is going to be so great. It's going to make managing my diabetes so easy. And then they keep checking their blood sugar and they're like, how is my blood sugar like 150 fasting when I didn't eat a single carbohydrate yesterday? The reason is this. Because the pathway is still the pathway. The body's still trying to raise glucose. The other challenge is that the way it raises glucose is by using cortisol. And cortisol is a real problem if you want to manage blood glucose over the long term, because it's pro-inflammatory. And so that's the only thing the body has left. If you don't give it glucose and fructose, it can only turn to the system where cortisol is the primary driver of liberating proteins and fats from the tissues to be turned into glucose to try to make energy in a pathway that's 300 times less effective. And in the process, damaging the pancreas, because the fats that you're pulling out of the tissues are not saturated. They're mostly polyunsaturated. And so as a result, now your pancreas is weaker, your cells are running on slow motion, you're making 300 times less energy. Your body is literally running on cortisol. And you might be getting thinner, but all of those things are the hallmarks of disease. On top of it, you're not able to convert thyroid hormone. There's no T3 to interact with the cell. Even when you have T3 available, the cells are in low energy mode, and thyroid is a high energy metabolic mode. And this is key, because this is also what happens when they give people who are in low metabolic mode and eating very little food thyroid hormone, is it actually creates more stress. Because one thing that I know is, as I help women raise their metabolic rate, which we use all kinds of data to show, hey, we're raising the metabolic rate. As we do that, we often have to also increase the fuel we're giving the body, because as the cells start to actually function the way that they're supposed to, they suddenly need a whole lot more fuel than you were giving them previously, which is why persistent, really low calorie and or low carb dieting does not work, because they both create stress-based pathways. And if you give thyroid to those people, they're going to tank eventually. And I hear this all the time. I felt so good for the first little bit and then it didn't feel good anymore. This is why. Because your cells got a little boost and then they went right back into low energy function, because although the thyroid hormone was there, the body had no fuel to enact its message. And so as a result, the cells had to divert to the stress pathway anyway. As you can see, this all keeps coming back to whether you're in the stress-based pathway or the energy-producing pathway. There's only two options, and you literally choose them based on what you eat, what you take, and keto is one of the big drivers. Now, you know, this is the thing, is that if the more that we're already living in this stress state. People that I work with that have never been on keto are living in a stress state. Keto just ups the ante. And that's why also in the beginning, most people go, oh, it feels so good, except for the fact that it's because they're addicted to the impact of stress hormones in their life. That's why people like caffeine. That's why when women get prescribed phentermine for weight loss, they think it's great, because prescription methamphetamines, which phentermine is, and stress hormones all feel like we're going gangbusters. And I'm going to explain this to you. It's something I really realized. So in classical Chinese medicine, when we talk about energy generation, you're supposed to really live off the energy that you're able to cultivate from really nourishing the spleen and getting your body to have profound and brilliant digestion and do the alchemy of living from that space. Your kidneys are your reserve energy. Now, it's no accident that your adrenal glands sit on top of your kidneys. So when we turn to stress energy, we're literally consuming the kidney chi. We're just consuming it full force. And we love that feeling because it's a very pure type of energy. But it was meant to be used as reserve power. And this is what the Chinese medicine teachers all talk about. Your kidney chi has a finite limit. You can't replace that. So if you burn through it by not giving your body the foods that the spleen needs, which by the way are sweet foods. So, you know, well-cooked grains, cooked fruits, these are all spleen nourishing foods. Raw honey, maple syrup, these are all in Chinese medicine, they nourish the spleen. Cooked sweet vegetables too, like root vegetables. If you're not consuming those foods, which means you're not getting glucose and fructose into the body, they knew this back then, you're not getting those into the body, then your spleen gets weak because you're not feeding it. So if all you're eating is meat and, you know, low starch vegetables and fats, what happens is none of those foods are the spleen's favorite food. So as a result, your body turns to the kidney for energy, which is supposed to be your reserve, your treasure, which is why I often refer to it as, would you spend your retirement in your 40s knowing that there was no way to replace it for 60, 70, 80, and 90? No, no one would do that. But that's what we're doing with our health when we go on these diets that are all focused on using stress hormones as the primary energy generating pathway and not nourishing the spleen, because that's the only consequence. There's no if, and, or but. Your body only has one path it can go down at that point. So in the end, we end up consuming the kidney chi, which cannot be replaced, and also further damaging the spleen chi, which we needed to be able to do the alchemy of the body. And then eventually when the kidney chi crashes, which it always eventually does, then the person finds themselves like, oh geez, you know, I'm achy, I'm tired again, I'm not sleeping, I'm anxious, because the body's just so revved. This is the common consequence I see all the time. And it's one I've experienced myself. I did keto years ago, thought the same thing as people were promoting, and thought the science looked good, until I've personally discovered that it absolutely made my insomnia worse. It amplified all the pre-thyroid symptoms I had and sent me into full-on hypothyroidism. It actually caused a lot of aggression and anger. I was completely out of sorts, and my progesterone levels got tanked. My estrogen went way too high. These were all the consequences, and they're the ones I see in women every single day because it's backup power. And so the thing that we need to pay attention to, sorry, I want to make sure I catch up with everything I wanted to give you guys, is that the more that we live in this place, the more rapid our cells age. And so what'll happen is initially you'll think you're getting that clean burn from the kidney energy. So you're drawing off your retirement, you're drawing off your longevity, you're drawing off all the defenses in your body, which by the way, too, one of the first systems consumed by a switch to keto is your immune system. The thymus has been studied to be completely degraded in some people within 6 months of going extreme low carb. So your immune system is tanked, you're diving into your kidney chi, you're damaging your spleen, your thyroid can't convert hormone, your liver's getting congested because you're also, the longer you stay in a stress state, the higher your estrogen goes. So now the liver's getting bombarded with more, which means also in a stress state, the liver doesn't detoxify. So now you're getting more toxic buildup, and the cells are dropping into low energy states. This is how we make disease. This is exactly it. Now it's how we make the silent diseases though. So the byproducts of the two primary energy pathways are very clear. If you use glucose and fructose to make energy, you will produce carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. ATP is the unit of energy. Those are things, we all know carbon dioxide, harmless, right? Water, harmless. If you use fat and protein to run into the let's make glucose, make energy pathway, your byproduct of that process is lactic acid and nitric oxide. Neither of those is ideal. And lactic acid is the primary tissue generator of cancer. So cells that are already weakened by chronic stress, which don't have membranes that can now work effectively, which is what happens, they're running in low energy states, they have no influence from thyroid, who are then being bathed in a bath of lactic acid, because that's the byproduct of the energy generation pathway that you're on, are the cells that are going to be highly susceptible to cancer. Every time it's studied, when you reduce lactic acid buildup in the body, you also reduce the incidence of cancer. But the only way to permanently reduce lactic acid buildup in the body is to deal with putting the cells into a proper high energy state, which is why it all comes back to what's the stress state? How are the cells making energy? How's the thyroid communication? How's the liver detox? But it still all goes back to the stress state. Which energy pathway are you using? That's the ultimate question. And then how are you dealing with that downstream? So keto is the antithesis of life formation over the long term because it forces the body down the emergency pathway. You wouldn't use emergency power for your house all year long, so why would you do it for your body? And this is what people are doing over and over and over. And the challenge is that we get duped into, I just wanted my jeans to fit better tomorrow. But the problem is that we have to be willing to ask bigger questions. It's not just I want my jeans to fit better. It's I want my life back. I want my energy. I want my brain clarity. I want my longevity. I don't want to get cancer. I don't want to get Alzheimer's. That's another big consequence of going down this path. We know for a fact that Alzheimer's, they call it brain diabetes. They also call it cold brain. Here's the reason. Because the cells in the brain use more glucose and more thyroid than any other cells in the body. So if you live a life where you don't have that function, it is raising your risk of Alzheimer's every single day. And this is, again, it's like this is how we end up down this path. And all those scary conditions of aging are because no one ever taught us that this is how we partner with our biology. And health really is a partnership. You absolutely must partner with your body. You cannot treat it like it's stupid. You cannot just assume it's doing what it's supposed to do, regardless of what you feed it or how you live your life. You actually have to recognize that this is a divine partnership. Our cells are little miracles in and of themselves. They have incredible means of allowing us to survive. But the last thing you want to do is live your life on emergency. And that's what most people are doing. And this diet is just another one that leads people down that path. They think they're doing something good, and then they find out that it's like, oh yeah, I've had people, I had to have my, people tell me, I had to have my thyroid removed after doing keto. I had a goiter develop after doing keto. I had liver enzymes elevate. I had food sensitivities go wild. I had insomnia that generated. My muscles had fibrosis. These are all signs of aging. These are all signs of a body that is shutting itself down. And this is why this diet is not the diet that helps you heal thyroid. Now, like I said, what you need is you need to be able to meet the needs of your cells. And this is not something that there's just a one-size-fits-all approach to, because the reality is this: depending on your body, your current energy state, all these other factors like how rapidly aging your cells are, how your membranes are functioning, how your mitochondria are functioning, all of these things matter in terms of determining how many carbohydrates do you need just to meet the base need of your cells. Because that's all where I start with people. What's the base need of your cells? And once we understand that, then we can work in, okay, let's meet the base needs. Let's also make sure we're addressing any of the other background factors. Is the liver toxic? Do we need to make sure that we're helping the body do T3 conversion? Do we need to make sure that we're helping the liver release toxic estrogen? Do we need to make sure that after years and years of living under stress, that we nourish the gut appropriately so that your body can actually balance things out and actually have a nervous system that functions? These are all huge aspects, which is why, there's no way for me to lay out just do step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because it's not like that. But what I can say is this: if you are a woman who is actually done messing around with your biology, playing small, treating your body like it's stupid by just throwing it on one diet after another, and really want to preserve that kidney chi, to nourish that spleen, to save your longevity, to prevent the cancer and the Alzheimer's, but more so to live a joyful, vibrant, life-inspiring, I am partnered with my divine self life, then go ahead and set up a call with us. The women I work with need to be committed to that path, because we are talking about transforming the way your body's operated for a long time. And in order to do that, we have to be willing to dive in and take some honest looks at what's really happening, and not be looking for just make me feel better tomorrow, but be looking for, I want to be the best me that is ever freaking possible on the planet and for the rest of my life. And I want to know how to partner with my body under any circumstance. That's what I do. So if that appeals to you, cool, set up a call. If it doesn't, cool, not a big deal. But what I want you to know is that these fad diets are fad diets for a reason. And I know the keto people, oh, it's been around forever. I get it. But the fact is that the science of our longevity does not support its use. And the science of how the thyroid works and the liver works and the gut works and the brain works does not support its use. The science just isn't there. And you guys, they've proven this over and over and over. There were doctors back in the 30s and 40s that successfully treated diabetes actually using dense carbohydrate-based diets and never had their clients have issues with blood sugar. It's just this aberrant base of the fact that we just want immediate results. And so people are pushing so hard and they don't care what the outcome is because they figure they'll deal with that later. That's how medicine is set up anyway. You know, we did the treatment. Yes, your body's failing now, but look, we cured the disease. I mean, that is how the medical model works. I just don't happen to agree with that model. My belief is we live in a divine structure that has a divine template for perfect function. And when we meet the needs of our body in that way, where we pay attention to these rules of how it works, then we can have unlimited healing. If we try to force it or control it or make it do our will in spite of how it's organized, just like anything, we're always going to meet with problem. So pay attention to that. If you've been considering keto, I guarantee you, if you're a woman over 40, or even a woman over 35 at this point, the odds are you absolutely have a silent thyroid condition. And keto is not going to make that better. And the odds are it'll make it tremendously worse. And that is not something you deserve. So be kind to yourself. Really recognize you are a beautiful, brilliant, divine being. Your body is amazing. It's smart. It is so wise. It's done everything you've ever asked it to do. Maybe it's time that you partnered with it instead of force it or call it, in essence, inadvertently call it stupid. Wouldn't life be amazing if you were truly partnered with your body for the most magnificent outcomes you could ever imagine? That's what life's supposed to be. Blessings, guys.